welcome to our webinar. We're just going to today walk you through a few of the reasons why we think it's important to take part in this NEB process for the Kinder Morgan pipeline, and then a step-by-step walkthrough on how to fill out the online application form. It's a little more complicated than it probably should be, and we want to make sure everybody has a chance to participate. Okay, I put this in just for a little bit of context. Of course, we're going to spend most of today talking about the Kinder Morgan pipeline, which is the purple line there on that map that runs to Burnaby. We're not going to get into the details of the project that much. There's, of course, lots of information online, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end of the webinar, but we're going to focus mostly on the process today. And we're actually going to start with the Enbridge pipeline because I want to compare and contrast how the National Energy Board has changed the process and how it's going to be different than the joint panel review that some of you may have taken part in. Obviously, the joint panel review saw overwhelming opposition from citizens from all across British Columbia. But more important than that, it saw kind of unprecedented participation in a process like this. And that really changed the narrative around this pipeline, and it was an important part of the campaign. Having images like this protest in Prince Rupert outside a joint panel review hearing on the news every night for months, for us that were involved in the campaign, really changed the tone and made this a national story. We were able to leverage this National Energy Board process and make our campaign much more powerful. Now, I know a lot of people, including myself, were probably disappointed with the outcomes of that panel, but it really, I can't stress enough how much this was a real opportunity for us to change the narrative on this pipeline and get our issue into the national sphere. Okay, well, following that exciting opportunity to participate in our democracy, the pipeline companies and the oil companies and the Harper government wanted to make sure that that could never happen again. And that was one of the major focuses of the Omnibus Budget Bill C-45. It changed most of the important laws around environmental assessments and around pipeline approvals in our country. So it changed everything from the National Energy Board Act to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, the Navigable Waters Act, the Fisheries Bill. All of these were changed with the idea in mind to both make it easier for pipelines to be approved in the future and to make it harder for people like you and I to take part in the process and have our voices heard. The most important change between what happened during the joint panel review and what's going to happen in this process is that people have to prove that they're directly affected by the project in order to take part. So I'm using this slide to kind of compare and contrast again different communities and how they're impacted. Only one of these two communities is going to have an opportunity to be included in the NEB process, but of course both of them are definitely impacted. On your left there you have the Westridge neighborhood in Burnaby, and that's the 2007 Kinder Morgan oil spill there. And on your right, the village in the Philippines that was devastated by last winter's typhoon. For folks like you and I, we probably see a direct connection between pipelines and the increased impacts of climate change worldwide on places like the Philippines and right here at home. We're also, very concerned about what the NEB calls upstream impacts, what happens in the tar sands. Unfortunately, the NEB does not consider either upstream or downstream impacts. They and have tried to very narrowly define what directly impacted means. And I think Eugene now is going to, in a little more lawyerly fashion, walk us through exactly what the NEB means by directly impacted.
Excuse me. Thanks, Sven. So as Sven mentioned, the National Energy Board Act was changed recently so that they now have to consider, or they can not only accept folks who they, in their opinion, are directly affected and or have some relevant information or expertise. And there's been a lot of questions about what that means and how they're going to interpret it. The short answer is we don't know exactly. The longer answer, and what we're going to hopefully help people navigate through today, is what exactly that means in terms of your application and putting it together in a way that kind of confines this test. I do want to say briefly that the language of directly affected is important to be reflected in the application, because that's what they're going to look for. The NEB has provided some guidance about how they're going to interpret it, and it's on the next slide here. There we go. So this is just directly from the NEB's own website. And so what they've set out here, as you can see, is what they're going to look for is the nature of the person's interest, and the kind of specific and detailed interest that is going to be affected by the potential project. And they give some examples there, and those are worth noting. I would not consider that a closed list, but certainly good examples to know what they'll be looking at: commercial, property, or financial interest, personal use and occupancy of land and resources, and the use of land and resources for traditional Aboriginal purposes. So, in past inquiries, such as the Cohen inquiry on fisheries, tests have been for standing have been put forward in a quite even more strict language. Substantially impacted was the language in the Cohen inquiry, but the way that it ended up being interpreted in the end was fairly broadly. And so what we are hoping that the NEB will do is interpret it broadly. What we're hoping that folks who are applying will do is really, look at these examples and think about how their lives will intersect with the project. So that could be owning property nearby or on the pipeline, or working nearby, or even something like commuting in an area or spending recreational time there. I think for the purposes of the application, and we'll get to this a little further on, it's important to be as detailed and specific as possible about the connection to the project. If I can just get the next slide here. The second piece, relevant information or expertise, again, what they'll be looking for is the source of that knowledge, and then how that relates to and will add value to their own decision-making process. So again, if there's something, whether it's a specific qualification, so you're a marine biologist who specializes in oil spills, might be a good qualification to have, or if it's something like, I've been fishing in the area for 20 years and I know how the tides move, or that may not guarantee acceptance, but certainly it will be a factor, and it's worth listing in your application. So as I said, in the past, tests like these have been interpreted fairly broadly by tribunals and by courts, and we suspect that some of the impact of just having the directly affected test, and I can say anecdotally that certainly some of the folks that I've been speaking to are being dissuaded because of the test, because they think that they won't pass it. And in a lot of ways, that kind of chilling effect that as a result of these changes is already accomplishing the goal. So what we're hoping that folks will do coming out of today's webinar is to, rather than be discouraged because you may not qualify, or you think you may not qualify under the directly affected test, make your best case possible. And what it will help us do is look at the trends of how the NEB is accepting and interpreting that section. Those that may or may not inform, may or may not lead to future appeals. It's really going to depend on how the application has been processed and recognized, and the reasons given for that. So just something to keep in mind. It's really useful for us who are working on this issue to be able to have, to be able to identify trends and to be able to point to numbers, and certainly it will be interesting to see how the NEB interprets this section, and how severely they cut the numbers of folks who apply.
Okay, thank you, Eugene. So now we're going to start walking you through the online sign-up form. This is going to be online later, so you don't have to follow along at home. You can, play it back at your own pace and go step by step that way. I also just wanted to briefly mention that if you don't want to do the online form, there is a paper option, although it is much more difficult than it probably needs to be. If you want a paper option, you need to email the NEB and request a form, which will be sent to you by registered mail. You'll need to sign for it. The form, then, only you can fill it out. You can't make copies or share it with neighbors or friends. And if for some reason you choose not to fill out the form, the NEB will want it back at the end of the process. Okay, so you will find this website at neb-1.gc.ca, and this is more or less what the home page will look like. The first step in this project is actually finding the application form. So how you do that is way down there on the right corner of the home page, you'll see Trans Mountain Expansion. Click on that, and it will take you to a page that looks like this. And from there, you need to click on Can I Participate in the Hearing, which is perhaps not the most obvious place, but it will take you to this page, which you need to scroll all the way to the bottom, and there you'll find this How Apply to Participate button. All right, so you've navigated the first step and actually found the form, but before you can start filling it out, you need to create a new account. There's two ways to do this. Most of you will probably be going with the GC key option. This is a login for government websites used for several different processes and sites. And we'll walk you through that real quickly to show you what you can expect. So you create a user ID and password and click Register for New Key. You need to accept the terms and conditions. And this is the screen that you will fill out to create your account. As you'll see, there's 3 different security questions, and you need to fill out all of them. But it's pretty straightforward, and everything here is explained thoroughly. Once you've done that, you'll get a screen that looks like this. Most of you will be first-time users. And you can. The other option is to sign in using your online banking password from one of these banks. If you do bank with one of these banks and don't feel comfortable using your banking password to participate in this process, you can of course set up a Government of Canada key and go that route instead. This is what that screen will look something like. It, of course, will depend on which bank you use, but it will be similar to this. Okay, so you've found the application, and you've managed to create an account on the government website, and we'll walk you through the application. So most of you, I imagine, will be applying as individuals. There's also options here if you're applying on behalf of someone else who can't fill out the form for some reason, or if you're acting as counsel for them. And of course, there's an option for groups or organizations as well. So that's the first step of the 11-step process. Second step is, again, pretty straightforward. It's just a little bit of information about the process you're applying for. There's some links here to information on how to participate and how to apply for funding for those who are going for full intervenor status. And we're not going to talk about funding tonight. So it's a very complicated process. Okay. Again, this is pretty much just accept that you've read this. This is where they have the a link to one more document. It's similar to the information that was presented earlier tonight about directly affected. Okay. Finally, a kind of substantive step. This is accepting the privacy agreement, and we wanted to, give you fair warning. Basically, you're agreeing here to have the details of your application put online for the public to see. All of them, as soon as they're completed, go up on a web page that looks something like this. If you click on one of those little files, it will take you to a page, and you can open up in PDF form everybody's application. And we wanted to draw your attention to the fact that the applications online do include personal contact information, including address, phone number, and email. All right. Step 5 is giving the government all that information, your contact information, so they can get in touch with you and put it online. Step 6 is to add an authorized representative. So if you're going to have a lawyer or somebody else represent you at some point in the process, this is where you enter their contact information. All right. So this step is where you decide what kind of participant you're going to be in the process. And there's only 2 options with this process. For those of you that spoke at one of the joint panel hearing reviews, there used to be a 3rd option here. Basically, you can make oral statements about the project. As part of the new NEB Act, that level of participation has been removed. So you really only have 2 options, which makes this a bit of a difficult decision for some folks. If you choose to be a commenter, you'll have the option to write a letter to the panel expressing your concerns about the pipeline. The other option is to be a full intervener. So interveners have a lot of access to the process, but it is also a fair bit of work. You get to provide evidence and ask Kinder Morgan to questions about their application that they are required to answer. If you do provide evidence, though, Kinder Morgan has an opportunity to ask you questions about the evidence you've provided. You also get to submit a final argument. And this is really your opportunity to say whether or not you believe the pipeline should be approved. I will say that being an intervener it's kind of what you make of it. So if you choose to go the intervener route and at some point are overwhelmed with the amount of paperwork they're sending you, or find it to be too much, you can kind of just stop contributing to the process and nothing bad will really happen to you. So especially for those folks who are very directly affected with pipelines going near their property or on their property, or believe that they really want to take part in hearings, the intervener is the option that will give you that kind of access to the process. Eugene, did you want to add anything to that? I'm going to take that as Eugene's mic is muted. Okay. So the next step here is where you decide whether you're going to apply as directly affected or having relevant information and experience, or both. So Eugene has already really thoroughly gone into what directly affected means. It's probably the best route for most of you to take. And again, I'll re-emphasize what Eugene says. If you feel like you're impacted by this pipeline, don't let the process scare you off. Please take the effort to apply. We want to know what kind of applications get through, but we also think that all of you have a constitutional right to take part in this kind of process, and we want to hear from you, and we think the government should too. Okay, this is probably the most important step in the form. You have to do two things in this step. One, there is 12 issues that the process is going to consider, and they range from the needs to the process to the risks of oil spills and people that will be impacted by those. So the best advice we can give you about that part of this step is to tick as many of these boxes as you think you will want to discuss at some point in the future, because you can't go back and add issues that you haven't indicated you have an interest in your application. So be as inclusive as you think is reasonable. And then finally, the most important step of the whole process, down at the bottom of the screen, you can barely just see it. There's a box where you have space for 500 words, and that's where you make your case why you're directly impacted or have expertise that the panel needs. And this is, really important. Be as specific as possible. Instead of saying something like, I fish on Burrard Inlet, you want to say, I fish on Burrard Inlet 5 to 6 times a year for about so many hours. The more detailed and specific you can be, the better a chance you have of being accepted into the process. And then we have two really short steps here. One, what language you want to be contacted in, and two, whether you want to use the online document repository or you want to get your documents some other way, and they haven't clarified what that will actually look like yet. And then finally, you get a chance to review your document, and when you're ready, hit submit and send it in. And it will be posted online almost immediately. Okay, and that wraps up the kind of formal part of our presentation, unless Eugene wants to jump in here and add anything. Eugene?
I think we'll spend the rest of our time here answering any questions that folks might have.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions, you can...
So if folks have questions...
Yeah, you can just write them in the questions pane, or you can use the raise your hand tool to indicate that you want to ask a question verbally, and I'll unmute your line. Okay, so we have a written question, and it's, FYI, I just logged into my GC Key account to continue filling in my application, click the button to continue to the NEB, then got error. An error has occurred on a page titled National Energy Board Participation System. So, I don't know. Do we have any information on that?
I know that earlier this week, the entire system was down for routine maintenance. It was actually, they scheduled to take it down right during Kennedy Stewart, who's the MP for Burnaby Douglas, and has been doing a lot of work to get his constituency involved in this. They took it right down during an information session he was putting on for about 300 local residents. So there has been ongoing problems with the site. Bear with it, and it works a lot of the time. I'm sorry, I don't have more for you.
Okay. So one other person is saying that they are having a problem as well. We have another question. If I apply on the basis of my expertise on GHG emissions from the oil sands life cycle, which are ruled beyond the scope, will I definitely be denied participation?
Yeah, if that is the only case you make to be a participant or intervener, you will likely be denied. If you also make a case that you're directly impacted because where you live or work, or because you use lands or waters that will be impacted by the project, there is a chance, even if you include something on climate or tar sands or one of the other many important issues that are covered by this review, that you'll be accepted. You also have the option, and I know several people that are planning to do this, of kind of coloring inside the lines when you apply, and then working these issues that aren't covered in the 12 official issues in later on, because there's a lot of overlap, obviously, between climate and tar sands and some of the other issues that the panel is allowed to look at.
Next question is the ID at the beginning of the form your name or something else?
To create your GC key, it's a username. You can make it whatever you want.
Oh, so it's just like signing up for an email or like any other.
Yeah, just like signing up for any other online account. It's pretty similar.
You can put, for example, your favorite Neil Young song as your
Sure. Okay. Next question. Can people who are listed in an organization's application also apply as an individual? Does anyone know?
I would say yes, but both applications will be subject to the same test. So if you're part of an organization that is directly affected, but your individual participation is directly affected, or your individual situation is directly affected in the same way, it remains to be seen how they're going to interpret that. But I would say it would be good to, when you do your individual application, to really point out how you would be directly affected as an individual as opposed to as a member of a group.
Okay, next question. Do you think that NEB has a list of names? We'll be looking for folks who were active or intervened in the joint review process. Do you think that having been active in that hearing would be a help or a hindrance in being accepted? Sorry.
I don't think, Eugene, do you want to take that?
No, you go ahead.
So I definitely don't think it's going to be a plus. I also don't think it's going to be much of a minus. They are going to judge these applications based on each on their merit. It is an interesting point, and this is another change from the joint panel review, that Kinder Morgan will actually have a chance to review all the applications and comment on their substance before the National Energy Board makes their decision.
Okay.
And so again, this, I'm just to add quickly to that. What we will be very interested in is what that looks like when the NEB issues its decisions on who can and cannot participate. And so if there are folks on the webinar, or others who are going to be applying, we will be very interested to see what the acceptance and rejection reasons look like, with an eye to the possibility of an appeal of that.
And the reasons that they use for rejecting people will be made public.
Correct.
Okay. Next question. Is there a different standard that the board will apply when considering who may write a letter of comment versus who may be an intervener? If so, is it possible to apply as both and have the board sort out which way one will be allowed to participate?
You have to choose which one you want to apply for. I think it's possible that interveners will get a little more scrutiny than commenters, but legally speaking, the test is the same for both.
Okay. Next question. Given that the NEB is, in my opinion, not neutral or independent, is this worth the effort? I was a participant in the Enbridge Joint Review Panel hearing, and it was a great deal of work.
So I would argue that for those of us opposed to the pipeline, getting lots of people involved in this process is kind of a win-win for us. And here's why. I think one of two things will happen. Either a lot of people will be rejected due to these new rules, and that will give us an excellent opportunity to demonstrate exactly how biased the NEB can be and how broken this new system really is, and bring attention to that. The other alternatives is that the NEB chooses to interpret this new law much more liberally than we thought they might initially, and that means that we get a process with a lot of public participation, and we're able to leverage it the same way we were with the Enbridge Northern Gateway process, and get the nation's attention really on the Kinder Morgan pipeline and what's going on here in BC.
Okay. Next question is, looks like they are not wanting any tanker issues discussed by the look of their topics page. I'm a Gulf Islander and will want to speak on this part of the project. When Kinder Morgan presented on our island, they had absolutely no information on how oil spills will be dealt with.
So Kinder Morgan has chosen to include tanker traffic in this assessment. And for those of you that live in an area that could potentially be impacted by, will be impacted by tanker traffic, or could be potentially impacted by a spill from tankers, you all have a case that you are directly affected. I urge you to make it. There is a section in the application, I believe it's section 7, that deals with tankers and tanker traffic, and it definitely is grounds to participate.
Okay.
And just looking at the issues list here, I think 4 potential environmental and socioeconomic effects of the project. Number 5, potential environmental and socioeconomic effects of marine shipping activities. Those would all fall under, or be issues that would be appropriate for that question or that participant.
Okay.
And
Next question is, can we also comment on the problems of shipping, such as risk of spills, increased traffic, and noise in the Gulf Islands?
Again, I would say that's squarely within number 5, issue 5.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay. Next question is, how close to the pipeline must you live in order to be considered directly affected?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. There's no hard and fast rule, and this is partially what will be interesting to see how the National Energy Board responds. Certainly, folks who live, near the pipeline, near the Westridge terminal, should be, in my opinion anyway, should be considered. There's a number of spill modeling studies that are part of the application, which they may or may not use. My suggestion is to make as strong a case as possible for why why you're directly affected, and not refer to proximity unless it's something that you think will help you.
Okay. So we have a question that's kind of similar to one we've already answered, but it's a little different. If I apply as an individual, can I also apply separately for a group that I help lead?
I think the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any rule barring that.
Well, I guess a good question would be, is there sort of an email address that you have to register and they'll only allow you to apply once with the same email address? Is that a thing?
That's a good question. Or a GC key.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that, Sven?
I know as far as GC keys work, you can register multiple times with the same key, and in fact, we've got a bunch of computers here in our office that we're going to use to sign people up tomorrow night, and they'll just have one key per computer. So to make the process simpler for folks. So it's certainly you can have more than one application with the same key, and I believe it wouldn't be a problem to use the same kind of the same information for both a group and an individual application.
Okay.
Again, as Eugene covered earlier, you want to make different cases for those two applications. So.
Yeah. Next question. When will the NEB make a decision how long after I apply whether I can participate?
We don't have an exact date, but we're expecting what's called the order paper, which is kind of the beginning of the official process in April, and we believe that the NEB will have to make those decisions by then.
Okay. Next question is, will the NEB require documentation to verify a group's authorization for a person applying for a group? Good question.
Not as far as I can tell. There doesn't seem to be an extra step. The group application is pretty much identical to the individual one, except for that you tick a different box on the first page.
Okay. And this is a comment. Just some info. As I continue to try to access the application form, I now get this error message. The runtime service cannot communicate with the entitlement service. You must edit or replace this page before making it public. This makes no sense to me. That doesn't make any sense to me either.
I'm curious what the entitlement service is.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, sir, we don't. Unfortunately, we're not privy to how the systems are working, and it is certainly frustrating to see this type of response. But that's what it is, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, next question. At the end of the form, is there an opportunity to save the draft and put it away for later? Or do you have to go through the whole thing in one shot?
So if you start to fill out the form and don't complete it, you can log back in with your GC key and pick up wherever you left off.
Okay. Okay, next question. I live along the marine tanker route. Any suggestions on making the case for being directly affected? I'm not a fisher or a marine tourism operator, but a resident living and working on the coast.
So sorry, Eugene, you go.
You go, okay. Well, I was going to say, definitely stating how you're affected is important. So if you live right on the tanker route, how is it that the route that the tankers will be going through will impact your life? Will it affect your day-to-day life? Will a potential spill affect your property values? How do you use your home space in terms of as part of your daily life, and then think about how both the tanker traffic and a potential spill might affect that. I think you're probably in fairly good shape if you're directly on the tanker route. So that's what I would really focus on. The personal and economic impact that that could come from both from just the tankers themselves, but also from a potential spill.
And if you want more information on potential real estate impacts, there's a business group that's concerned about the pipeline called Conversations for Responsible Economic Development that has done a great study on the potential impacts on real estate values of an oil spill that you can find on their website.
Or even just living near a pipeline.
So next question is, so even if we think we will be rejected, isn't it important to try anyway? So there is proof of numbers of citizens concerned. So who is going to keep track of the numbers?
So as we mentioned earlier, all the applications are posted online as soon as they're submitted. And a number of the environmental groups that are taking part in this are tracking those numbers and keeping an eye on it, and we'll also be tracking who's accepted and who's rejected, so we can help build those cases, legal cases, and the public case going forward.
Okay. Next question. I think we've answered this, and the answer is yes, but I'll just reiterate. Will they let participants speak on the tankers side of the issue, and will they even consider it relevant? So that was a yes, right?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. How did the application to participate process work regarding the Enbridge Line 9?
Line 9 was actually very similar to this process. They also used the directly affected test, and because of that, very few people got to take part in that process. And as a matter of fact, ForestEthics has launched a lawsuit in Ontario against the federal government about the Line 9 process that's still in front of the courts. And we're attempting to make sure that this kind of process is much more open and allows for greater participation in the future.
Okay. Next question is, I live in South Surrey.
We also
Go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to, I think there was also we saw the first versions of the kind of chilling effect of these new rules, and the number of applications was fairly low, or was lower than, I guess, what it had been for Enbridge. So there's multiple ways that this is reducing the participation, and so I think it's important. That's why, coming back to that earlier point of why, if you care about this and you think that it's going to affect you, it's worth that application, even though it is a frustratingly painful process.
Yeah, and just to follow up on my own point, one of the experts we called in that lawsuit was a behavioral psychologist, and they testified that in their minds, the form and process for the NEB process was designed intentionally to make it difficult for people to apply. And that's why we're taking extra steps here to help folks understand the forms and the process.
Okay. Next question is, did I ask the question about South Surrey? Oh no, wait, that was the one I was going to ask. I live in South Surrey near White Rock. I love the outdoors and I fish just about all the local rivers. Is this enough to justify my plan to participate?
Definitely. Be as specific as possible when you describe your use of the land. Obviously, if there's a spill either tanker spill or a pipeline spill along the Fraser River, it will impact the estuary and many of the rivers in and around the Lower Mainland that you're probably using for recreational routes.
So what I would suggest here is to have, before you put together your application, have a quick look at some of the maps that are included in Kinder Morgan's application. It crosses a number of rivers and many that are connected to Fraser, and be as specific as possible, as Sven said, in terms of which ones you use frequently and how frequently that will bolster your application.
Okay, next question is, why are they open only to hearing from people who will be directly affected when there are people across the country and the world who are against the risks to the natural environment?
That's almost a self-explanatory question. I guess, you know, we did some research into how the rules in Bill C-45 got written. And basically, they were in many cases word for word suggested by industry lobbyists what should be included in the new act and what shouldn't. This law was designed pretty much by the oil industry itself to make sure that it's hard for people who have legitimate concerns about these projects to have their voices heard.
Okay. The next is it's more of a comment. People in Chilliwack might be directly affected because the project crosses our drinking water aquifer. Others may find similar, just putting it out there, or just putting the idea out there for anyone else who lives in Chilliwack.
It also crosses the Vedder River for folks in Chilliwack. And we are having a workshop next week out there. I have my times and dates right. It is the Tuesday the 4th, I believe, at 7 o'clock at the University of the Fraser Valley campus out there. But for confirmation and all the details on the workshops we have coming up in the Fraser Valley and the North Shore and here in Vancouver, you can go to ForestEthics.org and find all the details.
Okay, next question is, my organization, CPAWS BC, has specific concerns regarding impacts on protected areas and wilderness values along the route, including legal boundary changes to parks that are expected. We were involved in the processes that led to the protection of some of these areas. Does this give us standing?
Not necessarily, but certainly worth making the case. Yeah, we've been kind of targeted more for individuals this discussion, and if you want to send me an email, Peter, we can have a conversation about groups and particular strategies for that. But I don't think there's any guaranteed standing as a right just for being, you know, experts, or you know, they're really gonna, I predict, use that directly affected test to potentially limit a lot of folks who would otherwise be experts.
And when we're talking about parks in this pipeline, it goes through some of, you know, the most amazing parks in our country. It actually goes right through Jasper National Park and Mount Robson Provincial Park on the BC side of the border. Interestingly, Kinder Morgan was a little sneaky about that. They doubled those sections of the pipeline in I believe 2007. That's what they called the Anchor Loop project to avoid more controversy when they proposed this larger expansion.
Okay, next question is there a list of environmental groups in the coastal regions that can be provided? I don't have such a list. That would probably be a very long list. Does anyone know of any index?
Nor do I.
No.
off the top of my head now.
There are a lot of them. I'm sure someone on Google has created such an index, but we have not. And next question is, any press releases, public events coming up to encourage applying? I bet there are people who don't know the season is open.
So there are a lot of events besides the ones that ForestEthics are organizing in the Lower Mainland. I know the Wilderness Committee is organizing a couple here, both here in Vancouver and Victoria. Sierra Club is organizing events in the Gulf Islands and the South Island, and so is the folks at Rain Coast Conservation. They're organizing events in some of the Gulf Islands as well. And you should check out all of their websites for more details on this.
Okay. And then there was just a request made earlier saying at the end of the questions, could we go back to the list of how we're affected and discuss? So I'm thinking she means in the application process, there's that pick list.
Or Eugene's slides that really detail the directly affected stuff, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or the list of how we're affected. Yeah.
Did you want to do that?
Sure.
Now?
So do you want to go back to that? Go back to that slide, Sven, and I'll.
Oops.
I think we had some great, some of the questions that came up today. Helped me to kind of also think about how to interpret that section and how people could potentially talk about how they are directly affected. So we heard, for example, people who own property either on the pipeline route or on a tank route, and so that would fall square under property or other financial interest. I think the people who recreationally use the area and who would be impacted by both the construction of the pipeline and a potential leak or spill from a tanker would obviously have a impact. People who live, who the project would potentially impact their offers, again, very important. And so I think it's making those types of connections that will make it harder for the NEB to decide that you are not directly affected. I've heard a lot of people talking about what personal use means. Again, here it could be anything from you drive along the pipeline route, or you cross the pipeline route on your way to work every day. From that to you go there, you have an annual family picnic in Barnett Beach or something like that. Again, the key here is to really specify what the interest is with as much detail as possible, and the frequency of use, and then how impacted you may be by the project, and really leave it to the NEB to make it hard for them to say no, without getting into the infinite combinations of how people may interact with the project. Those are the types of things that I would urge people to think about. Anything else on that, Sven?
No, I think that covers it perfectly. And again, just want to re-emphasize that folks, if you feel that you're impacted and you need to apply.
Yes.
Okay, and we just have one more question saying, please confirm, yes, you can put away draft and edit later. I think the answer to that is yes, right?
Yes, you can definitely.
Yes.
Yes, you can definitely do that. Yeah.
Okay, so you can go and you can change your answers.
Yeah, once it's filed, though, it's filed, and you can't make any changes after that. So.
Okay. Well, that's we've answered all the questions, and it's just about 7 o'clock. So I think if there's no further questions, we will wrap it up then.